Hey, what's up, Four-Eyed fans? Welcome back to our Four-Eyed mini recap show we're doing here every Sunday night here at Fantasy and Frames. I'm your host, Jorge Edwards, and with me got Todd Barnes. How are you doing, Todd?
Not bad. It was a rough week with all the injuries,
Oh
but
my God, so many injuries. I don't even know where to begin. Like after the
left and
first
right,
the first
every game.
quarter of football, everybody was getting decimated. Um, let's start off with the 49ers. Their quarterback goes down, their running back goes down. Nick Bosa is feared to be gone for the year. What do we make of the San Francisco team going forward? I mean, what are your thoughts?
It's definitely Nick Bosa looks like it's going to be an ACL. Mostert and Jimmy G's ankle and Mostert's knee. So, those are kind of ones. I heard Mostert's going to at least miss a couple weeks, but
I heard,
Jimmy G, we don't really know with. So,
he's Shanahan came out and said that they're expecting Mullins to start next week.
Oh, Mullins is going to start?
Yeah, because Jimmy G has a high ankle sprain.
Well, luckily for the 49ers, they're a run-first team, and they have backs that can step up. Mostert did have a killer game. First touch of the game, he took it to the house for 80 yards. I think he had like a 65-yard touchdown called back on a hold as well.
Right. So going forward, I'm assuming Tevin Coleman is probably rostered in the majority of people's leagues. But do you think people should be going out and getting Jerick McKinnon?
They use multiple running backs. If you're hurting at running back and you have the spot, I don't see why not.
He's had back-to-back weeks of double-digit fantasy points here and half PPR /
and he catches the ball. So especially in a PPR league, he could actually be, at least for the next couple of weeks, a player you could actually plug in your flex depending on the matchup.
That's a very good point. Definitely him in PPR, 100% agree. Now let's go to the Giants. Man, Saquon, feared ACL. That's pretty big.
Yeah, they said the test that they did on the field and everything, that looks like it's pretty sure for an ACL.
This guy can't really stay healthy. His rookie year, there was a game against Carolina where he hurt his ankle, but it didn't cost him any time. Last year, he hurt I think he had an ankle sprain also. And then this year, with the fear of a torn ACL, you have to ask yourself, with all the concerns people had in terms of draft value around players like Dalvin Cook, who had a history of injuries, going into the next draft season, how far down the rankings are we moving Saquon Barkley?
That is a tough one. And I don't think that's an answer you can really answer now. I think probably see what they do in the offseason because, they have a lot tied up with them. And an ACL isn't – unless you're AP, an ACL actually affects you.
Right.
So that's kind of something – at least it's first week of the season, so he has a lot of time to recover. He's going to have a full year, second week of the season. So that's on his side. But sad to see him go down because definitely one of the most exciting – backs in football to watch.
No, definitely. And Deion Lewis came in relief.
Scored a TD.
10 attempts, 20 yards. Wayne Gallman is there. I believe when Saquon went out last year, Wayne Gallman came in and put up a decent game in his stead, but that was short-lived. In terms of Giants players I want to grab off the waiver wire, I'm not really feeling any of these running backs. Are you, Todd?
I'm not at all. Yeah, honestly, I would just stick with their pass catchers, but then again, their pass catchers probably aren't on the waiver wire. Shep went out with a toe injury today too, so looks like it's Slayton and Golden Tate for now. Evan Ingram too.
Would you be trying to acquire either a Slayton or an Evan Ingram in these leagues if you were a Saquon? Just in general.
Well, Evan Ingram, I don't think he'll play the whole season anyway.
Okay,
well,
that's a good point.
I actually like Slayton. I think he's a pretty talented player, and they're going to be coming from behind a lot because of that defense. So, and he's a guy that needs one play. He needs one play to make your day. So if you're desperate and you need to throw him in your flex, obviously he's not a wide receiver too, but he could be a flex option, especially depending on the matchup. And like I said, one play, he can get you your points.
That's a very good point. We're looking at targets here for the Giants. Darius Slayton led the way with 6. Golden Tate, how about him coming back and having 5 targets for 5 receptions
47 yards.
I mean, he led the team in fantasy points and half PPR scoring. Is Golden Tate somebody that you would want to kind of slide into your flex going forward, or is it kind of like I'd rather have Slayton or nobody?
I actually own Tate in a lot of leagues. I mean, if you go back looking at what he did last year, he had 200-yard games. I think he had 3 or 4. No, actually, he only had one was a 96 and one was 95, and he did have 102. And he had limited weeks, but he was getting 5 receptions on a regular basis. So, I mean, if it's a PPR league, he's more of a floor player, I would say. But sometimes you need that.
So what about like a half PPR league? Is he still, I mean, obviously not as valuable, but is he somebody that you would pursue there, or is it just PPR or nothing for Golden Tate?
I mean, he's a viable option no matter what, because he did last season. He had 3 games, double-digit targets. So, I mean, they're coming from behind a lot. So, the one thing is you just never know who's going to get they spread it around.
That's a good point. That's a very good point. Yeah, I'm on board there. If Darius Slayton if you can grab him, looks like him and Daniel Jones have the closest rapport with one another out of all the wide receivers. I would definitely try to acquire him. Definitely with you though, Evan Ingram. I don't trust him to be on the field.
Don't trust.
Let's talk about the biggest upset of the day. The Dallas Cowboys squeaking out a win over the Atlanta Falcons. You know, this is another 20-something point lead that the Falcons have blown in recent memory. Is this going to be Dan Quinn's legacy? You know, just blowing huge leads in big games.
Man, that defense is atrocious.
"Quote unquote" big games. Well, one of them obviously was the Super Bowl. No, it was horrible. What was not horrible though was Calvin Ridley's production. 10 targets for 26.4 fantasy points. Do you think he's taken over as the number one in Atlanta over Julio?
The thing with Julio is I noticed he is the best wide receiver on the field every time he steps on the field. The thing is he's not selfish at all. Like you'll see him going down and making big blocks, just all different types of stuff like that, drawing double coverages so Ridley can get open. And that defense is so bad. I mean, I think the options are going to be there no matter what, but Ridley looks like he's the real deal.
You know, and talking about other wide receivers there, Russell Gage for the second week in a row, 9 targets, 13.6 fantasy points. Last week he had 12 targets, so he's definitely being utilized a lot in this Atlanta offense.
Yeah, he's manning the slot for them, and they're not getting too much production from the tight end position.
Except for today with Hurst.
Yeah, they got it, but from the slot really.
Oh, I understand.
So when they're going to the slot, they're looking Russell Gage's way.
Now, Todd Gurley, I went running back heavy and early wide receiver early in one draft, and I drafted Todd Gurley to be my RB1 and a couple other running backs. But 21 attempts, and you only got 6.1 fantasy points. 2.9 yards per carry. I thought this was supposed to be like a prime matchup for Todd Gurley in this offense to really take it to the Cowboys, and it just wasn't the case.
3 yards a carry.
Yeah.
Under.
Right, just under. Are we concerned about this going forward? Is he becoming somebody who's potentially, benchable?
I saw something in the first half. They were inside the 5, and Ito Smith had back-to-back carries inside the 5. So I don't know about benchable, but I mean, I'm looking at Todd Gurley with concern for sure.
Nice. And of course, Dak Prescott with 47 passing attempts for close to 40 fantasy points, 39.8 to be exact.
Hat trick with rushing touchdowns.
Right, exactly. Zeke with his 22 attempts and 19.2 fantasy points. I mean, I know we take this for granted, and I know we probably take Ezekiel Elliott for granted, but he's been the most consistent running back outside of his legal troubles a few years ago in terms of health and productivity. I don't know why he's never really considered as the number one overall running back in a lot of leagues, but he really should be. Obviously he doesn't have the reception upside that players like a Christian McCaffrey do. Which, speaking of Christian McCaffrey, he went down with an ankle injury. He's going to have an MRI looked at tomorrow. I mean, everyone just started dropping like flies today. It's ridiculous.
if McCaffrey goes down for that team,
Oh,
oh man, that is going to be like watching the Jets.
pretty much. Pretty much. Let's shift over to Pittsburgh. In our pregame show, our 4-Ed pregame show today, and we had Michael Bauer, we had David Ibrahim from Fantasy Go, Michael Bauer from the Dynasty Rewind podcast, and of course we had Ryan, the fantasy dude over on TikTok. We were talking about, what do we think of James Conner? Are we buying the hype that he is going to split carries? Is he going to be the guy? He was the guy today.
Oh, he was the guy. 77% of snaps in the first half alone. 16 carries, 2 targets.
Yeah, no. If anything, the concern with Benny Snell, Benny Snell, what it was 3 for 5 for, what was it? 3 attempts for 5 yards.
Yeah, 3 carries and a target, and then Samuels had 2 targets. So he owned the backfield.
Right, and Benny Snell got you negative 1.4 fantasy points. I bet all you put in bids for Benny Snell are really kicking yourself right now. But hey, you didn't know what to do. We didn't know what to do. No one knew what to do in this backfield except Mike Tomlin. But it was good to see Conner get his 6.6 yards per carry and get that touchdown. He even was involved in the receiving game a little bit. 2 targets, 2 receptions for 15 yards. But he got you 19.1 fantasy points in PPR in half PPR scoring. Going forward, me being a Conner manager, out of necessity, I have to play him. But if it's not out of necessity and you're like flexing him, do you still feel comfortable with that going forward there, Todd?
I mean, most of the time Conner is your RB2 or RB3. I mean, I don't want to own him just because I can't trust him to stay on the field. That's the one thing. But, if I have him, I'm putting him in the lineup from now on. Now that we know what Tomlin does with him.
Right.
They did say he was the bell cow, but the guy in that game that I could not take my eyes off was Deontay Johnson.
Right.
That's back-to-back games now with double-digit targets. And he had a kick return called back, too. His kick return game is unreal.
Right. 13 targets for 19.2 fantasy points. The hype is real. He had, I believe, 13 targets in week 1. 10 targets, thank you, in week 1. Ben is finding a rapport with him, and to be honest with you, he is making a lot of plays. He's shifty, elusive. He makes people miss because obviously he's elusive. I'm really regretting not picking up Deontay Johnson in my leagues now.
So am I.
No, definitely.
And actually, I think he's a trade target. Get him, if you can get him right now, get him.
What do we think about Cortland Sutton coming back? We got the news during their 4-Ed pregame show earlier today. And he didn't do horribly. I mean, he got you 9.1 fantasy points.
He didn't. He left in the game, though, right?
He did. He left with, I want to say,
leg
cramps or something like that.
Yeah, some leg cramps.
I wonder how much of that was just, let's just get these players off the field because we're not going to be – although it was a fairly competitive game. That's the thing I don't get.
He had a couple pretty big catches, though, for him early on.
Right.
First half. Noah Fant looked amazing.
Right. We were talking about Noah Fant earlier in their pregame show, which all of you should check out our pregame show, which, by the way, had been starting at 12 p.m. Eastern. But I think, we're going to move that a little bit up so that way you all have more time to get ready for your games during the 12 o'clock hour. Or if we're on the West Coast, what is that, 9 o'clock 10 o'clock is when games kick off for you all?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. All right. And so, Jonathan Taylor now in Indianapolis, 26 attempts for 18 fantasy points. The coming out party was there in Indy. Miles Sanders, 20 attempts for 18.6 fantasy points. Not really shocked there. I was shocked at Melvin Gordon, though, 19 attempts against Pittsburgh for 15.4 fantasy points. With Philip Lindsay not being there, it's just going to be another issue or another case of volume.
That's actually the second time in the last 18 games the Pittsburgh defense has given up 14-plus fantasy points to a running back.
That is pretty amazing.
Yeah, so he had a good game.
Yeah, even with 3.7 yards per carry, he got you those 70 yards. And I think that's the one thing that people take for granted of Melvin Gordon is because with the Chargers, they had Austin Eckler, and he was their primary receiving running back. But this guy can catch balls out of the backfield, too.
Mm-hmm.
Targeted 3 times, got a touchdown. That was pretty impressive. But I think the most impressive fantasy performance of the day was Aaron Jones. His 18 attempts for a whopping 43.6 fantasy points, the combined total of, 236 yards. Wow. We thought, this was going to be a running game last week. It was a passing game this week. It was a running game. Devonta Adams left with a hamstring injury, which is fantastic. Insert sarcasm. Aaron Jones, 18 attempts for 168 yards. I mean, this guy was all over the place, both in receiving.
He's already at 4 touchdowns on the season.
Yeah.
Yeah, the hat trick today. So
I mean, you look at it, who's following behind him. Jamal Williams with 8. AJ Dillon, who everybody was scared of, is at 5. Maybe these guys get worked into it later on in the season, but for right now, you're playing to win right now. You need to get to the playoffs first before you start planning for the playoffs. And for those people who picked up Aaron Jones in the middle of their draft, that's pretty much a steal, I believe, so far.
The thing is, he could have had a better day. There was one ball that he had the linebacker, whoever was covering him on the wheel route, beat in the end zone, and Aaron Rodgers just barely put it out of his reach. And there was a couple other ones that he just barely missed. He could have had an even better day than he did, and that's crazy.
Let's now jump to Tampa Bay really quick before we sign off. Leonard Fournette, he got the bulk of the touches there. You really saw him take over this backfield. Are we comfortable inserting Leonard Fournette now into our starting lineups going forward?
From now on, I'm pretty comfortable. I mean, 12 carries, 5 targets. The 5 targets was what I actually really liked. That means Brady trusts him a little bit. Shady actually had 7 targets in that game.
That's pretty ridiculous.
Yeah, so Shady's probably going to be a guy I keep my eye on because he could actually – if Fournette steps in, Jones is going to take the back seat, but I could see McCoy actually stepping up and being kind of like a James White-esque, kind of like how we thought Dare would be, but isn't.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, so he's had multiple – I think he had 6 targets last game, so I would keep my eye on Shady.
All right, good to know. And with that, folks, that wraps up our mini recap show. We know you're getting ready for Sunday Night Football. Pay attention. Tomorrow morning, our 4-eyed recap article will be coming out where we examine more players from this weekend and give you some insight as far as what we thought about their performances and what to expect from them going forward. And, of course, tomorrow night, we will be doing another live stream where we'll be having our mini waiver wire show covering all the positions on offense and defense. So for Todd, I'm Jorge. Todd, go enjoy the rest of the game, sir.
Yes, sir. Have a good night.
All right, y'all have a good one.